Hello everyone, Lisa with Lisa Cape and Quilts here, and today I'm going to do a short video on how I achieve the illusion that a t-shirt block is overlapping on your quilt. See this gray block up in the top left hand corner? It looks like it's sitting on top of this white block here. I was sharing the progress of this quilt over on my Facebook page, Lisa Cape and Quilts. I like to update my clients on the progress of their quilts, and they enjoy watching their quilts being made. And a friend of mine asked, how did I overlap this block here and this block here? I'm sorry, it goes out of focus when I do that. And so I thought I would do a short little video because it's truly not overlapped. If you look at it from a distance, it looks like it's just sitting on top of that block. However, it is just an illusion, and I'm going to show you how I do that with graph paper, or more specifically my grid set, but you could do it with graph paper. I'm going to show you how to achieve this look here by filling in some empty spaces on your quilt. So this section here has already been sewn together. We're going to move down just a little bit, and if you see this dark black block here, when this is sewn together to this section here, it's going to look like this lighter gray block is sitting on top of this black block. I like to do that with my t-shirt quilts because it gives the illusion of dimension, and it looks like it really adds a lot of interest to the quilts. Really, it's just a matter of piecing in blocks around and filling up the space with existing colors of your block. So let's move over to where I am on the progress of this quilt on my graph. Now here we are on the progress of my quilt. You can see I'm using graph paper. I'm actually using my 2-inch grid set. This is the full size, and so when this quilt is complete, this will measure 88 inches wide and 88 inches long. All of these little small white blocks represent a 2-inch finished area in the quilt. So it's really easy to map out and plan. And if you've never seen my collage style t-shirt quilt video, I'm going to put a link to the description in the description box below. And that is like a 4 or 5 part series where I'll walk you along planning a quilt with different size blocks, much like this one. So if you haven't seen that series, I will answer a lot of questions like how to measure your blocks, different sizes, how to cut them different sizes, how to organize your quilt, and then how to use the graph paper to figure out the placement and how to sew together your blocks when they're all different sizes. So that link is in the description box below. You can go check that out and then come back, and maybe this will make more sense. Each one of these blocks here has been cut out and placed on the board, and usually I start out with a white empty graph, and I mark out my blocks, and I number them, and sometimes I'll put the size of them in there, and as I cut out each one of the shirts, I color it in a color. So all of the orange blocks have been stabilized and cut to the dimensions that are written inside the block. These 3 sections here have actually been sewn together. So everything you see that's colored in green were once orange, but now they've been sewn together. So now I have one larger block in this green shape. Then I moved down here and I pieced together all of these smaller pieces, and now this ridge section is one chunk of quilt. Then I moved down here and all of these blocks were sewn together, and now I have a large chunk down here. And when you do that, it's going to make it really easy to see where to sew together your larger chunks. And so it's my way of figuring out how all of these smaller pieces are going to be sewn together. So at this point I have 3 chunks of fabric, but what I really want to show you is this section up here in the green, and it might be hard to see because I've colored it pretty dark, but remember in the beginning of the video we have this gray square right up in here, and then it looks like it's overlapping this white square here, when really this was a 14 by 14 inch block. This is a 14 by 16 inch block, and right in this space here, if you pay close attention, let me see if I can move you down a little bit closer. Okay, maybe that's better. If you see this section here, this was a section that was 2.5 inches tall and 10.5 inches long. And what I did was I took some scrap pieces of fabric from this white shirt and I pieced it right above this block here. Now this did give me a partial seam, and so I will have some partial seams in this quilt. I show in the collage style video how to achieve and sew together a partial seam, so if you've never done that, make sure to check out that series. I do have a partial seam there. However, when this whole section was sewn together, now I have the illusion of this block sitting right on top of a large white block. Now if you look at the quilt up close, then you'll actually see a seam that is sewn right in there. But once the quilt is all finished and quilted, you really have to search for the seam that joins this small strip to this block. And overall, when you stand back and look at the quilt, you'll never even notice that seam. What you do see is the illusion of dimension that looks like your blocks are layered on top of one another. So all of these white empty squares that you see here are actually sections of the quilt that have not been cut yet. And so what I like to do is figure out where I can create that illusion of dimension. So these empty sections here are a great opportunity to do that. Let's see, let's move down to right here. Right here I have a block that is 12 inches wide. It's actually cut 12.5 inches because we have our seam allowance in there. And it's 6.5 inches tall. Right in this section here would be a great place to give the illusion that this block here is sitting on top of this block. And we can do that, whatever color this block is, cut out a section of 4.5 by 4.5 and sew it right there. This will give the illusion that this block, whatever I choose to put in here, is actually sitting on top of this block here. I hope that makes sense. When I get to this section of the quilt, then I will actually show you what this looks like. Now that we're back, you'll see I've pulled several pieces off the wall and have them down here on my table. So let me show you on the grid, and what I did is just taped off this section so that we could only focus on the pieces that I have. Remember, I was just showing you how I would fill in this one square here. That is this piece here. So I just wanted to pull down the pieces that we're going to work with in today's video and focus on just this section of the grid. So I just used some painter's tape and taped that off. So you'll see I have my sections. This section here is 12.5 inches wide and 10.5 inches tall. Right below it, I filled in with the same shirt fabric this little section here. So when this is sewn together, it's going to give the illusion that this block is sitting right on top of this gray block. And then I extended this blue block over to the left, and so that will give the illusion that this blue block is sitting on top of this gray block. And so you can see how you can add all kinds of different interesting dimension to your quilts. Now we were talking about this block here, which is 12.5 inches wide and 6.5 inches tall, and then I cut a piece of the same fabric from the back of the shirt and filled in this section. And what's going to happen is this block here is going to look like it is sitting right on top of this. It's going to look like I cut one big block and this block is sitting on top. However, it's just little pieces that we're sewing together. And then I have this block here, and we're going to have a little tiny piece of black that extends the look of this shirt right here to fill in that space. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this together. Let me bring you in close so you can see what that looks like. So here we are up closer, and we're going to sew this section together and then pin it up on the wall, and we'll get a good overall view of what this quilt will look like. So the way I'm going to tackle this section and add it all together is I'll start assembling the smaller blocks, like this block here, this 4.5 by 4.5. I'll sew together with this little block right above it. That will create a block that is the same size as this block here. So this and this will go together here, and then this will be one section that will join to this block right in this seam, and then this will be one large chunk of quilts. Then I'll move over here and I will sew this block here to the bottom of this block here, and that will give me one long seam here that I can attach this block here. So you can start to see we're going to have some partial seams in here. Once this block is on this block, that becomes a unit. We'll sew it onto this, and then we can join this section right in here on this seam. Then I can sew this block on top of here, and we'll have a seam here that we can join this section to this section right here. This is all sounding really confusing, isn't it? I think what I'll do is do a little slideshow of the progression of how I'm attaching this. That actually might make more sense. And as we do it, I'm going to color in the blocks and show you where we are along each step. I'm thinking that will make more sense than me trying to explain it. So let me get started with a slideshow as I piece this section together. We are starting with our very first two pieces, and you can see on the grid that I've colored those two pieces in green. We've added our third piece, and at any point during this slideshow, you can pause the video to really study the grid. Now we've jumped up to the right portion of the section we were working on and pieced these two pieces together. Then we attached the light gray block, the 12 by 10 inch block, on the left side. And then we can piece those two little sections together to make one great big green section. At this point we have three little sections left. I'm going to attach the smaller black block to the bottom of the larger black block. We do have a partial seam in these two black pieces. If you'd like to learn how to do that, make sure to check out the collage style series in the description box. Now that we have one longer seam, we can attach the bottom York High School Falcons white block to the bottom portion of these two black blocks. Now we can begin attaching these three pieces that we just joined to the larger section of green that we are working on together. We can achieve that by attaching these two sections and this seam that you see right in the middle of your screen. Once that seam is done, all we have left to do is to complete the seam below the York wrestling shirt and the black block. Now that we went through the progression of sewing all of our pieces together, this is what my piece looks like. I'll have a partial seam right here, and then this section fit in just like that. And over here we have the illusion that this blue block is sitting on top of this gray block, just like this. So let's take a look at the graph one more time. That is the section that we just sewn together, everything in green. So you can see coloring in the section as you piece the all your pieces together really helps stay focused and see where all of your seams are going to be. I guess next I could start working on this section down here and then join this section to this section, and then I'll move up here and piece all this together. And I like to work in smaller chunks and make sections that are about this size, and then I can see really easily how to piece everything together. So let me go ahead and clip this up onto the wall, and we'll get an idea of how this will look in our quilt. Now you can see my studio is a disaster. When I'm working on a project like this, I have stuff everywhere. But the whole quilt does not fit into the frame. The very top portion of this quilt is not fitting in, and the bottom portion is not fitting in. But you can see this is the section that we just completed together, and it's pinned up, and then there's all these other pieces. So really what I wanted you to see is that from any kind of distance, you do not see the seam of where we pieced together this little gray piece right underneath this block. It just looks like one solid block that the blue block is sitting on top of, and that gives you the illusion that your pieces are stacked and not pieced. Also, let's see, this blue section here appears to be sitting right on top of that black block, which is really neat. And the black portion, although it's kind of blending all in, looks like it's sitting on top of the York wrestling shirt. So that is the way that I achieve this illusion that everything is three-dimensional or popping off the quilt. Now if you have any questions, I would love to help. You can go down to the comment section below, and if you haven't joined me on Facebook and you'd love to follow along in the progression of my quilts, I'll have a link to my Facebook page. If you're interested in the grid set, for this quilt I'm using the 2-inch grid set, but I have different grid sets as well. I'll put a link in my Etsy shop and you can check those out. Of course, using just regular graph paper and your own measurements would work just as easily. I hope this has answered your questions, and I hope that I haven't made it too confusing. Again, if you would love to see a progression of a quilt, a collage style quilt being made, I do have a whole series. That link is in the description box as well. Okay, you can see I have a ton of work to do left on this quilt, so I better get busy, and I will see you all really, really soon. Bye, everyone.